Welcome to The Good Pod, where today we're talking Elsbeth, Season 2, Episode 7, One Angry Woman. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Reed. With me, as always, the woman who tried to convince me to name this podcast Nut Jobs Who Talk About the Good Wife, Marissa Garza. Marissa, you good?
She said, I'm fine. I'm good.
Remember that, Marissa, when we started this podcast? You're like,
yeah, that sounds so like me. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, if there's anything, I mean, then the audience for that is just the two of us.
Yeah.
We are the nut jobs that watch The Good Wife. Yeah, we are here, episode 7. I thought this was an interesting take. We'll obviously get into it, but little format switch this one.
Yeah, this is very, very out of the norm, out of the formula of Elsbeth that usually takes. And I gotta be honest, I think this was a success for the most part. I mean, I think they would do well to really kind of get out of their comfort zone that they really have created with Elsbeth, because it on a normal episode of Elsbeth, it does feel very formulaic. And this just kind of felt like there were a lot of kind of twists and turns. We didn't know what was coming. So, I mean, in a way, we still got to where we get to where Elsbeth kind of solves the case, but it very much felt like a to be continued, right? Like there's more to come in this thing. It's going to be an arc that, goes, who knows if it's going to be continued next episode, or is it something that's going to continue throughout the rest of the season? We don't know. And that's what I love. It's not just one episode contained story. It's just, there's more to come with it.
Yeah, and it's something I think both of us have been looking for in the Elsbeth formula, because last season we had things that going on with Wagner, and we still have suspicions about his wife and all of that, but we haven't really seen any of that come to fruition in this season. And so the introduction of this new character, Judge Milton Crawford, it's really going to spice some things up, I think.
Yeah, I think there's going to be way more to come in this, and I enjoyed the interplay between Carrie Preston and Michael Emerson, so I'm excited to see what's to come. But before we dive too deep into this episode of Elsbeth, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. We always remind you there are some free and easy ways that you can support this podcast if you like what we're doing. The ways to do that are to review, rate, and subscribe. Wherever you are listening, you are watching, there is a way to review our podcast, whether it be through 5 stars, or if you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. We would love it if you could do those things for us. Hit the little follow buttons wherever you're listening or watching. That really helps our show get into the eyes and ears of more people. And if you just want to chop it up with us, let us know how you're liking the podcast or your thoughts on episodes, you can always email us at thegoodpodfeedback@gmail.com to share your thoughts. Usually when we have someone that writes in, we talk about it on the podcast, so we would love to hear from you about how you feel about our show, about Elsbeth, or The Good Wife that we also cover. So that's another way you can get in touch with us and interact with us. We love interacting with the different people that listen to our show and want to talk about it.
Yes, I saw a thread of someone who is doing a Good Wife rewatch, and I was like, the people need to know that there's a podcast out there. Yeah, I was like, listen, hey, there's a podcast, but you could be that person, people. Like, you could be the vigilante heroes that this podcast needs by telling other people that this podcast exists. So we really appreciate your help.
I've hopped in on Reddit and been like, hey, just in case anyone's looking for a podcast, we're here. And I think hopefully there's some people that have seen that, and that's why they're here. So yeah, we love to interact. We love to get feedback. So if you guys can help us with that, we would really appreciate it.
Yes. And your support of listening is always also appreciated. So thank you so much. All right, Jason, are we ready?
We're
Season
ready.
2, episode 7.
Do this thing. The debut that a lot of us have been waiting for since we've heard that Michael Emerson is going to be showing up on the podcast. And, for those that don't know, Michael Emerson is Carrie Preston's husband. So it's like, there was a moment where they were both on screen at the same time where it was like, they stopped. It was like, if you know, it's like, hey, this is big. They're on screen together. Now they had the I was reading a little bit about, because they've done some press for this, and I was reading about the different times they've been on screens together. Apparently Carrie Preston, I totally didn't remember this. I've watched Lost, but apparently in the flashback episode that it kind of tells us the backstory of Michael Emerson's character, Linus was his name.
Linus.
And Carrie Preston played young Michael Emerson's mother, gave birth to him on the episode, which is interesting and weird. And also Carrie Preston guest starred on Michael Emerson's show Person of Interest way back in the day, which also I should have remembered, but I didn't because I watched that show too. So yeah, this is not the first time they've been on screen together, but this is the first time they've been kind of on opposite sides of whatever. So this
they're
is very
in an adversarial place, and I love this particular pairing because Carrie Preston's character is Elsbeth, right? Like she's so bright and so quirky and everything. And then Michael Emerson as an actor, like anytime I think of him, I'm thinking of a man like Judge Milton Crawford. Like he's always like super serious, like super. And so to see these two people go like against each other is going to be really, really interesting. But let's get into finding out how they get into this adversarial role. Okay, so it's raining outside and it looks like someone is going to break into this apartment. Like at this point, I'm like, we are set up for a traditional Elsbeth situation. And I'm thinking, who's the masked person? Like who's our celebrity person, right? So it's Andy's house. Andy's got home from work. He's like, I can't come in. I just got home. Someone else can help at the office. Thanks, bye. And then all of a sudden, someone's like broken into his house and someone's behind him. And it's Delia. And Andy and Delia have a thing. They have a thing that's going on.
We got a thing. This is a thing. This isn't a thing. This is a thing. It's a THANG, a thing. They got a thing going on.
He's got a thing going on. And at this point, like, because Delia, the robber at this point, has unmasked herself, like, I'm like, who are these people? Like,
yeah, what's going on? Like, why is this? And of course, especially when she takes off that raincoat, we're like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. Like, and I don't recognize you. I don't know who you are. Okay, we'll keep watching. So they have their little role play time where Delia's trying to get into a safe.
Yeah.
Like,
I went from like, huh? To huh?
Yeah.
Like that was kind of where I went with it as things were moving along. As she like pushes him on the bed, and then you realize obviously this is like some weird kinky role play thing that got going on. And listen, I do want to say, as someone that
yes, Jason.
So I appreciate that we got a love scene between like two plus size individuals, which we don't see very often, like almost at all. So I really I thought this was a great like moment where like we just don't see this enough. We don't see real people that are out there in the world represented as as someone that is up there as well. In that community, I will say it was interesting to see that played out between these two people. So I really kind of a little golf clap for Elsbeth for showing that.
Way to represent. I also was like, oh, she's in charge and she's plus size. Oh, this is like, I'm like, oh, it's exciting. Yeah. So Andy and Delia have their little time, and afterwards, Andy is like, you go take a shower, whatever. Go, Delia, go and get in the shower. I'm gonna play some Donna Summer because that's what I need afterwards.
Andy's feeling good. He's like, let me jam up the Donna Summer, which is I'm like, okay, Andy, go, Andy. Like you into some Donna Summer? That's interesting. I wouldn't have picked Andy as a Donna Summer fan, but that's cool. I love Andy as he is. I'm just like, he's pumping up the jams after getting some. So more power to him.
Yeah, and he has like 3 seconds of joy before he gets kneecapped by a dude who we know, like at this point, we don't know who he is, but we come to find that this is Judge Milton Crawford, played by the Michael Emerson, as we have talked about.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Emerson, who Marissa, you, me, and Michael Emerson have something in common.
I know.
we all guessed it on the podcast. Rob and Akiva need a podcast. Of course, you and I went on to talk about The Good Wife, as we described, on our Good Wife side of this podcast a while ago. And Michael Emerson came on that same very podcast to talk to our friends Rob and Akiva about like some. Way Michael Emerson came on the podcast was interesting because Rob and Akiva wanted to talk to some celebrities, and they wanted to see who they could get. And through their producer who had some sort of connection, they were able to get Michael Emerson, who had no idea what podcast he was coming on to. So interesting that you, me, and Michael Emerson have all had done one thing, which is appear on Rob and Akiva in their podcast. We are like only 1 degree away from Michael Emerson.
Yeah, and like from Carrie Preston, like 2 degrees from Carrie Preston,
which means we are probably like 3 degrees away from Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, obviously. So like if you're ever playing 6 Degrees of RHAP, like we are like a very integral link to the lost world, or
we almost basically you could basically say like we almost like guest starred on Lost if you want
obviously,
if you really want to like connect the dots, like you could really put it that way. Like we were on Lost.
In a flash sideways, we're totally
we starred on Lost, like literally we are main characters on Lost, like we created Lost.
Yeah, I mean, I love polar bears.
Smoke.
So there's this man who we will find out, Judge Milton Crawford, kneecaps Andy, and Andy's like, I have no issue. I wasn't going to tell anyone. And I'm like, huh? What? This has nothing. This seems disconnected from the call that we heard Andy receive at the beginning of this episode, which was like, hey, I can't come to the office. Somebody knows the system better than me. So I'm like, oh, something's going on. And Milton's like, cool. That's going to make this so much easier. Let me turn up the music while I beat you to death. Like, what?
Man to death. I was like, damn. And Michael Emerson has played some really kind of dark, off the wall characters.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see him in this, and just like almost a kind of a not really gleeful, but you can tell like he didn't mind murdering this man.
No.
Like he it's not like he took pleasure, but he's just like, all right, I'm about to kill you now.
Well,
so like, he goes to town on Andy.
Well, and he was relieved that it wasn't going to be like multiple
yeah.
steps. Like he was like, this makes it clean for me. So I'm good.
So you're the only one I got to kill. Cool.
Great. Fantastic. And he's beating Andy with a baseball bat, and he takes the bat and puts it outside the shower where Delia is. And Delia, of course, is like, hey, Andy, I know you live Donna Summer, but why is this music so loud?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? The lady downstairs is going to call and complain to the police. So she steps out of the shower, picks up the bat, which is a integral part in the story, and then goes to find, obviously, that Andy is dead at this point. This is not, like I said, our usual setup here on Elsbeth, because we haven't even gotten to the credits. We have no idea what the motive is. We have no idea how this is connected. What were your overall takeaways, Jason, from this little setup?
It was great because usually at this point, the next scene would be Elsbeth and Kaya and whatever detective of the week we had would be at the scene. Elsbeth would find the stuff to be curious about, but this was totally different. This was like out of our comfort zone, and it's in the beginning you're thinking like, okay, this is a normal Elsbeth episode. Like, here is the murder, here is the crime, and now this is when Elsbeth comes in. But no, this is very different.
Yes. And we also get to see like an office scene before we get to the credits too. So Teddy, as we know, arrived last episode, and now Elsbeth is like parading him around the station.
I need the timeline because I'm so confused. Last episode,
it's like the next day.
Was yesterday Christmas?
Yes.
When did Kaya go on her cruise? What is happening? I don't because last episode we left off. It's like, oh, it's Christmas. Teddy's here as Santa because Ellen's gonna be all alone for the holidays. Kaya has to go on a cruise with her family for Christmas, and I was just like, did none of that happen? Did any of that happen? Was that a flash sideways? Am I in the right show? Where am I? Because now it's just a normal day. There's no more Christmas stuff up. There's no talk of Christmas. It's just Christmas happened at some point. I don't know. Because it seems like Teddy's here for a week, right? So was the end of that episode, last episode, was that like Christmas Eve? And we've been gone for a few days. Kaya went on her cruise. She came back.
Like what? Like a 2-day cruise?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm confused. That's what I'm asking. I'm like, what is happening? Because like this, it doesn't seem that connected to the last episode. It just seems like they totally dropped the Christmas of it all. They're like, all right, that's our Christmas episode, and now we don't talk about Christmas anymore at all.
That's over. I think you're on. I think it has to be at the end because we do see Teddy leave at the end of this thing. So I feel like this is the end of his stay. But it's the first time he's being brought into the office. So, and everyone knows who Teddy is, which is super embarrassing. I have been that kid where it's like, oh, Marissa, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh,
were you ever part of a take your child to work day scenario?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because like my mother was a teacher. She's retired now, but she was a teacher. And I went in for a couple of take your child to work days, mostly because I wanted to get out of school. And I was just like, hey, like, can I go to work with you? Which is also a school, but you're not gonna make me do schoolwork. And so my mother was a kindergarten teacher. So as I was an older kid, like it almost felt like I was almost like an assistant teacher. And I had to like I had to like corral little kids. It was so interesting and fun to me. Yes, when you get into a work environment with your parent, it's just like, oh, I've heard so much about you. Oh, this, and that. It's like, okay, this is embarrassing.
Yeah, I went to like a formal take your daughter to work day thing with my dad, and he's like, we're gonna do the whole day. I get to the gym at 5:30, so you're gonna come to the gym with me.
Oh,
and I was like, Dad, this does not sound fun at all. And then he worked for insurance, and so I had to sit and listen to what is insurance? Like seminar to learn about what insurance was. And then we had like lunch, and that was fun. And like to be in a big building, that was fun too. But then my mom was like, oh, so if you want to take your daughter to work day with dad, you can come with me. And I was like, oh, okay. What fun things will I get to do here? She's like, you can file this.
Yeah.
This is the thing you can file. And I was like, cool.
It
This
was
is
like,
totally different.
it was low key, not a take your daughter to work day, but a low key, like you get a helper for the day
Like
for the
unpaid
adults.
intern day.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
You get to take advantage of child labor day for the adults. That's what it was. And like, it was so interesting. How old were you when you did that?
well, I went to my mom's work like a lot when I was a kid, but they didn't have like a formal take your daughter to work day thing until I was, I gotta say 12, 13, somewhere in there.
Listen, I had to rail against the take your daughter to work day verbiage of that
I bet,
of that
yeah.
quote unquote holiday.
It was
was
a
like,
time.
yeah.
It was a time.
Because I was like, hey, like, why is it daughter and not just child? Like, that was the time when we were like, hey, it shouldn't just be daughter, it should be child. I was like, yeah, child, me. Like, take me, because
Yeah.
I don't want to go to school. That happened about
Yeah.
twice. And then I was just like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore because I don't want to hang out with little kids. Like, I'm good going to school.
It's like, I see what's going on here. Like,
Thanks.
I get it.
Thanks, but no thanks. Thought I was gonna be able to hang in the teacher's lounge all day, but no, you got me out here handing out juice boxes to little kids. I'm good. I'm done. Thanks, but I'm good. I'm good.
Well, luckily Teddy doesn't have to hand out any juice boxes, but he is being like accoladed as he makes his way to Elsbeth's office. Like Wagner's like, I heard about that. Good job you did.
Wagner's like, oh, the one and only Teddy. I'm like, Wagner, you know Teddy. You were just in a scene with Teddy last episode. Why are you acting like you're brand new? This is what I'm talking about. Doesn't make any sense. God.
I know.
Continuity.
Yeah. I mean, they're a little, not great on that. Teddy gets set up in Elsbeth's office, and Teddy's like, okay, like I can be here. And Elsbeth's like, I'm gonna go take care of this jury summons that I got in the mail, and then you can tell me your Teddy fact of the day. So it seems like they have this like agreement that Teddy will tell her one new thing a day. And again, going back to your timeline, if this is the end of the time, like what minuscule facts, we do find out Teddy's fact of the day at the end of this episode, but like in comparison, this might be like something big that comes out. I don't know. It's just another continuity error.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that Elsbeth was excited to be hopefully part of a jury because that means she's a true New Yorker if she gets summoned for jury duty. But now that Teddy's here, she's like, oh, I gotta get out of this. And I think we talked before on it might not have been here. It was probably on our Good Wife side of this podcast about how neither of us have been on a jury and we really want to do it. Like I really want to be on a jury. Like I know I'll probably regret it once I actually get on a jury, but I kind of want to do it now. I want to hear about the case. I'm very nosy, which should tell you why I podcast about reality TV, because I'm a very nosy person. So I really want to be part of a case and be like, ooh, we did what? Ooh, they did what? Knowing my luck, I would get put on some like really boring case and like have to
a traffic incident or something.
Yeah, I had to sit there for like 4 days listening to some nonsense. But yeah, Elsbeth, like us, was excited to get on a jury until she figured out that it would take time away from being with Teddy.
Yes. Agreed. And so she's like, makes her way over to the courthouse, sitting in the waiting room. I just have to say, I know this was for comedic effect, but it really did bother me that she went in between these people in the chairs, like with her big coat on, when she chose a seat on an aisle in the middle of the room. Like, I just was like, Elsbeth, just like go around. Like, you don't have to like, I get it, but you could go around. Anywho.
It's like when you're in the movie theater and people come from the far side and they go all the way over to us. Like, you could have walked around and gone through less seats and less people, but no, you had to make me stand up in my seat so you can get past my legs.
And she's got like this huge fur coat on. She's like, oh, did I spill that? I'm like, you could have spilled nothing. You just go around.
Bags, just hitting people with the tote bags. Annoyed.
Elsbeth. She meets two people in this waiting room. A marketer who has done some research that says all you have to do is tell the judge that you can't be impartial and you don't like lawyers. And Elsbeth's like, well, you haven't met me because I can be impartial and I am a lawyer. And then she also meets a podcaster.
Let me tell you, I almost texted you and was like, we can't do this episode because they're besmirching podcasters. They're making us look bad as podcasters.
Yeah, I mean, not the greatest of avatars for podcasters here, but I do like Elsbeth's curiosity when she's like, oh, what's the name of your podcast? Well, I've heard of it. I get asked that all of the time, and the response is also the same. No, you will not have heard of it. But I love that she asks if it's car talk. Car talk is like lore to Marissa Garza's it's like Marissa Garza lore. When I was growing up and had to go to piano lessons, my dad it would be car talk in the radio on the way there, and that was Click and Clack, the Tapper Brothers, and they tell you how to change it, work on their car, and people would call in and say like, my car's making this type of noise, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's the alternator or whatever. And so I would listen to that on the way back, and then it would be wait, don't tell me on the way back.
Wait, don't tell me. What is that?
Oh, so NPR has a game show called Wait, Don't Tell Me, where they'll have, it's not narrated by Bill Curtis, who's from Chicago. The show's also in Chicago, but he's adjacent because he's on The Good Wife every once in a while. Anywho, it's like a current event trivia show. And so they'll have like some comedians on, and then they'll have like a normal person on as well. And then they'll ask just trivia questions, and it's filmed in like a auditorium, and it's live in front of an audience, and so it's
that was your dad liked that thing, or was that
my dad liked anything NPR, so like I had to listen to it.
It's good to know that the nerd got inherited to you from your parents.
Very much so, but also I am unique and a unique individual.
You're unique in your nerdity. It's not just from your parents.
Yeah, I rebelled against the NPR until I had a car. But anywho, it is not car talk. This podcaster is still building his audience. And at this point, I'm like, oh no, is this going to be like going into Only Murders in the Building territory? Like, where are we going with this?
But he was like, I'm still building my audience. I was like, same, buddy. Same.
Yeah, same. I know that. I know that feeling. They go into the courtroom, and one of the members of the jury pool already knows everything about Delia. She's like, this lady like smashed a car with baseball bat, like she is crazy. And then, which is not a term that we want to be using to describe people, but then the podcaster dude's like, yeah, some women just turn out to be loons, like both of my girlfriends. And I was like, you are not doing good things for podcasters, Elsbeth.
Both of my ex-girlfriends. It's like, okay, yes. Yeah, you're two that you've ever had in your life. Great.
Well, then we see the judge walk in. It's time for everyone to rise. And this judge looks familiar to us as an audience. Oh, it's Judge Milton Crawford, the same guy who kneecapped Andy. So this, of course, is like putting us in a weird position because we're like, oh, interesting. How is this happening? And he is like denying every normal like objection to a juror that could ever be. Like Elsbeth is like, I am a lawyer. And she's like, I usually get excused. And he's like, no, that's okay. Like, you're fine. You can be the alternate.
Every person that has an excuse to get out, he's like, no, you're good. He's basically trying to stack the prosecution so that he can get a guilty verdict for Delia, but he did not count on Elsbeth being Elsbeth.
Yeah, no kidding. Back at the station, Wagner goes to visit the 5th floor and visit Lieutenant Connor's office. And Lieutenant Connor's like, I've prepared this list of complaints for our meeting.
I kind of thought, I was like, because Connor hasn't been around for like a couple episodes. Like, oh yeah, Lieutenant Connor is still a thing. Like, we're still doing this, and he's like, he's gotten together a bunch of like little complaints from around the office. Based on all his interviews, I guess, from all the people around the precinct. He's got these nefarious complaints.
Such as Browner did not fill the coffee pot after finishing it. Smullen smells like a middle school dance floor. So these are really things that need to be taken action on. But he's seeing that like having a DOG babysitter, aka Elsbeth, is the source of shame for this department. Like that's another thing that he learned about. So like he's basically saying to Wagner, like if you're not going to address the Elsbeth thing, you're going to have to kind of address these type of things to keep morale up. And so Wagner's like, okay, fine, I'll take care of it. Meanwhile, downstairs, Teddy's like, I don't care about New York. Like, it was just so random.
So he's like, New York, Schmoo York. You know, I don't like
F this town. A bunch of buildings. Like, I hate it. And Kaya pops in and is like, hey, how's it going? He goes, well, mom's juror number 13. So Kaya's like, oh, well, she was really looking forward to showing you the city. What can I do to help? Where was she going to take you? And they end up going to Coney Island. I wish we saw a little bit of this trip to Coney Island, but they went, I guess.
I thought this, if we had like a 90-minute episode, like, I would have loved to see some of Kai and Teddy's interactions, mostly because I think this would have been a good opportunity for Teddy to tell Kaya about his mom, and like maybe some things that Kaya doesn't know, and maybe some things that we as an audience don't know as well, from Teddy's perspective of having Elsbeth as a mother and how that kind of was growing up. So I wish we had a little more of that from Teddy. I feel like mostly this Teddy appearance was a lot to do about nothing really, because
Yeah.
it kind of came and went without any real insight, because I would have enjoyed seeing, like, hearing about his time with Elsbeth and what that relationship is kind of like. We got a little bit of a, like, a, a peer into it, but I would have appreciated more.
Yeah, and I think it would have like been easy to just tee up a conversation about like living with your mom. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like, like having some sort of like roommate commiseration or something like that. But they just end up going to Coney Island. Back in the courtroom, the prosecutor is setting up her case, and it basically boils down to the fact that Andy had a restraining order against Delia. 2 witnesses saw or heard someone breaking in, assuming it was her. After responding to a 911 call, Delia was found naked and crouched over the victim, covered in blood, the victim being Andy.
Why was she covered in blood?
I
It's
don't
like, did
know.
you roll
I was
around in
like,
it? What did you do?
unless she was like trying to like revive him and
Maybe,
like,
I guess.
I
It's
don't
like, how
know.
are you
Her
covered in
fingerprints,
blood?
her fingerprints were on the weapon, and she ends her argument by saying Delia was obsessed with Andy. Andy rejected him, and so she killed him. So it's in
Yeah.
your hands,
Yeah, I mean,
jury.
as it's kind of presented there, it seems like an open and shut case,
Yep.
because, like, hey, like, there was a restraining order, obviously, so there's obviously some past tension, and she was there when he was dead, so obviously, like, boom, done.
Bada bing, bada boom. A,
Yeah,
B, C. We're
and
done.
Milton's like, "Yep, I'm ready to rule. Let's get this thing over with. Let's get her guilty and get her out of here." I mean, honestly, I would like to know how Milton was able to finagle this so that he got this case. I mean, there's got to be some sort of luck involved or something.
I think it might have to do with some information we find out about him later in the episode.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. It'll
Mm.
see what we'll have to see what happens with the rest of the
You
character.
know, we love to theorize.
On the other side of the aisle, Delia's lawyer, Chaz Milano, the best or the lawyer you can afford, is living up to his name.
Yeah.
Chaz Milano looked interesting to me, Jason. Who is our friend Chaz?
Chaz is played by Scott Adsit, who a lot of people that have watched 30 Rock would know. He was one of the really kooky, like, writers on 30 Rock.
Or writers. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
As he's been around the block, around the Hollywood block, but that's what he's probably best known for. And he really played up the bumbling lawyer as much as he played a bumbling writer on 30 Rock. He did his thing here.
Yeah, he was preoccupied with things that are going on with his wife.
Like, he was just like, as the whole case was starting going on, he's like looking down on his phone. He's just like, could not be less interested in what was happening in the courtroom. Has the wrong opening statement
Yeah,
as
it's
he's
like
going.
about the zoo
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so he asks the court, he's like, hey, can I go to Kinko's and like just print out my new one? And of course, Milton's like, no, you can't. And Elsbeth is sitting there going, this lady deserves a defense. Like, this is not great. So she's clocking what's happening here with Milton. And Chaz wings some sort of opening statement by asking Delia in front of everyone, where were you when the murder was?
Dude's like, I was in the shower. It's like, oh crap, like that's not a great alibi.
Yeah, not great. Elspeth is still determined to get off of this jury. She is currently an alternate. So she goes and she asks Milton, hey, can I be excused? And the way that she sets this up, I think, is really interesting because it's a little infantilizing to the situation. Like, I don't know, it was weird because she's like, I have to be with my son, I have to watch my son. Well, where's his father? In Chicago. Oh, you're your son's only child care option? And she's like, no, he's 20. And I was like, oh, Elsbeth, is this something we're
Yeah.
gonna get into? Is this something we're gonna work through? Because this is weird.
But it also was just like, I mean, Elsbeth, like, do you really think that's a good excuse for you to be let out of jury duty because you have to show your son around? Like,
Right.
that's like, do you really think that's something that would be excuse worthy? Like, so it was just kind of weird that she decided that she would pursue this, thinking that this would be something that a judge would be like, oh, you want to show your son around the city? Go right on ahead. Like, no, this is
Yeah.
not a good excuse for you. But I did like how confused Milton was. He's like, so you don't have childcare? So we're like, you should have been excused already. She's like, oh no, he's in his 20s. Which again, I'm like, doing some timeline math, and I'm like, I feel like Teddy should at least be in his 30s to 40s at this point. But
Yeah.
okay, whatever you say, Elsbeth. If I'm like looking at the timelines for Good Wife and for Elsbeth, I'm pretty sure when we met Elsbeth in Good Wife, she said some things that would lead us to believe that
Teddy
Teddy
was
was
already here.
Teddy was an older person already in that Good Wife time, which was
Yeah.
about 14 years ago. So, but I'll let you have it, Elsbeth. I'll let you have it.
And she's still arguing, like, hey, I'm a lawyer. Like, you can totally let me off. Like, I wasn't expecting to be chosen. And Milton's like, I actually prefer having lawyers on the jury. Properly educated folks give me confidence in the verdict. I was like, oh, Milton's got some opinions about people. I can't let you go. He says, I've already let the second alternate go, which we did see, like, his mom fell, and so he had to go take care of his mom. If anything else, yeah.
Well, when we came into the scene, Milton was like, well, if some people just don't want to take care of their civic duty, I'm going to let you go. And then we find out, like, the dude's elderly mother fell. You're shaming him for needing to leave. It's like, all right, Milton, like, I see you, boy. Like, you're a trip.
Yeah. Well, and in Milton's mind, he's like, I can't like let this go because if anything happens, it could be a mistrial. Well, knowing that he is the murderer in the situation, that would not be good. I mean, it's not good for justice, but also just like not good for him. But he says to Elsbeth, don't worry, I anticipate this to be a quick proceeding, which only gets Elsbeth to ask more questions. And we know when Elsbeth is asking questions, it's not good for the perpetrator in that situation.
Like
but he is trying to show that he's above board here because he's like, I will alert the other lawyers to this audience so that, and Elspeth's like, oh, that's very like transparent of you. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Teddy's confused about everything about New York. He doesn't understand how the trains are numbered. He doesn't get certain things.
Listen, I've been to New York a few times, and I agree. I'm just like, what even is this? Like, what even is even going on? There's just too much going on at one time. Things are all crisscrossed, and there's tons of streets with different names and different directions. So I kind of agree with Teddy on this one.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming, for sure.
What did you think of the whole, like, Teddy just hanging out with Kaya and Wagner?
Drinking beers, knocking a few back.
Yeah, Wagner's like looking. He's like, is anyone looking at us? Like, here's sneak some beers. I'm like, Wagner, like, you realize that people don't like the fact that you hang out with Elsbeth and Kaya all the time. This is not making it better.
Yeah. And especially like Elsbeth comes in from court. You can't miss her because she's wearing her big poofy coat and all of her tote bags. So she comes in and she's like, this is really weird. Like the victim seems like she is the only one grieving in the situation. Stuff's going on. And this judge is really weird. And this is when Teddy starts to look up Milton on the internet and he finds out that he's a historical law society judge and is a federal bench candidate. Now, this is where I think the kings are nodding to the real world. Historical law society judge could be an allegory for the Heritage Foundation and the judges that have been put on the court by the Heritage Foundation and also the federal bench. So the thing is, in The Good Fight, they really do talk about this in great detail about how this like court takeover impacts the justice system and everything. But this, we have to remember, is a CBS network show. And so I think that this is like the watered down version of making this point to the audience where we're going to get to see some things happening because it looked like this is how I think he got the case in front of him because he knows someone at the DOJ, which we learn later. He is part of this historical law society judge. He has a lot of connections. His ancestors came over on the Mayflower. He has to know somebody.
And we also find out his uncle is a senator. So
yeah.
Like, okay, like you've got some connections. So so you think this is kind of like a really like a wink and a nod to people like the Marissa Garzas out there that would really pick up on this. Like, I see what you're doing, Kings. They're like, yeah, you see what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm reading between the lines. I see this. I could be wrong. This has only been one episode, but we'll see. While looking into Judge Crawford, we do get a Teddy and Elsbeth are really related scene where they're thinking in the same way.
On their face, like, maybe like stroke their chins.
Yeah. Back at court, the neighbor is on the stand, the neighbor who called due to a noise complaint, the downstairs neighbor. And this is where we get to see, like, Elsbeth is like making objections from the jury box. Again, she is an alternate, so I don't know why she's in the jury box, but anywho, she's like saying objection, like every time there should be an objection. Meanwhile, Chaz is still like on his phone doing all this stuff. She notices that the podcast guy is recording with a pen, so that's weird. And Delia does see Elsbeth and hear Elsbeth like making all these nods, and so they get like some sort of like baseball runner coach type of situation where it's like, hey, something should be happening. And Delia will then like nudge Chaz to be like, hey, something should be happening.
You should be doing your job right now. Like,
yeah,
you should be listening.
And his whole excuse is like, there's something going on. There's something going on with the wife.
Having trouble with the missus, you know. Just can't focus on my actual thing I'm paid to do. So, you know, whatever.
Yeah. A second neighbor gets on the stand. This is the neighbor who like saw Delia or saw someone on the fire escape trying to break into the Andy's apartment. And again, Elsbeth is still doing the signals in this situation.
Yeah, we get a lot of some things that we don't know are going to be important later. Like we get some time codes, we get some some weather things that we're going to need to know about later. So this is where we kind of lay the groundwork for that. Like I saw this at this point, I heard this at this time, and it's just like keep that in mind as you're watching the episode.
Yes. Yeah. Like if you're taking, those are the things that will fly over my head. But like the Heritage Foundation thing, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, you're paying attention to that.
Like, ooh.
That's like it's these little like Encyclopedia Brown clues, right? Like when you're reading these stories and things like pay attention to this time and to this weather. This is gonna be your point. It's almost like they should have like a little graphic on the screen, like this is a clue. Like pay attention
like
to
Blue's
this.
Clues.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you watch with your handy dandy notebook, these are things you want to write down in it. Now it's time for Wagner to take care of one of the complaints that Lieutenant Connor brought to his attention. And he brings Kaya into his office. What did you think of this back and forth of like Kaya thinking that she was going to end up going back to school and like thanking him for being a mentor, but he really is just there to say you're not storing your lunch properly in the fridge.
I thought it was a very fun scene, just like a really little fun moment where it's not like at first I was like, oh, what's about to happen now? Like I was like, what's going to happen at this point? It was like he's just taking care of his bureaucratic duty of being like, I've heard some complaints that you're not storing your lunch properly, and she's like, oh, that's it. Like she's like, yeah, because last time we had this like kind of important conversation, I had to go back to night school.
Yeah,
I do.
Which she passed apparently or whatever.
Well, we don't know that for sure yet.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But like, and she's like, hey, I want thank you so much for mentoring me. And I'm just like, but have we seen him really mentor you? Like, I feel like we were sold a bill of goods, and then we're just like, it just happened. Just believe us. Like, we don't need to show you it happened. I was like, I'm a little annoyed by that, but
Yeah, I feel like though in that situation also, like if Kaya was on a case by herself, like in your school situation that you want to see happening, like her first call would not be to Wagner.
Right. It would be to Elsbeth.
Yeah. And so that's really interesting.
I need to see that in action. Like I need to see more of Wagner, coaching Kaya. Maybe Elsbeth is on a case and Kaya and Wagner on a separate case or something. I just need something in that regard to show me that this is happening. Like her going to school. Like and we'll talk about another plot line that seemingly just gets dropped in this episode, which I'm really rather annoyed about later down the line here. But it's just like we have so many things that are getting set up. I'm not feeling like we're getting enough attention paid to those plot lines.
Yeah, the return isn't coming in. It's like they're just falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
Back at court, we have Mrs. Davenport on the stand, and she tells the jury that 15 days prior to Andy's death, Delia was smashing headlights on her car. And this is another point where Elsbeth is like, hey, objection, prior acts, like maybe you want, and she's like literally like this time she's like using hand signs to like say which objection should be called.
Yeah, this is an interesting like witness or whatever, because this person was apparently Andy's ex who is now a lesbian. She's like, but not because of Andy. I just want to make that clear. Like Andy's not the reason. I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, apparently Delia got very jealous and thought that something was going on between this woman because this woman and Andy shared custody of the cat. So she was coming to pick up the cat.
Yeah.
And Delia thought something else was going on. So that was an interesting little insight into what was going on. And yeah, this is the moment where Milton catches Elsbeth like
Yes.
giving signals.
Yeah. Yeah, giving signals, and he's like, "Hey, lawyers and Miss Tassioni chambers, let's go." It's like, "You're giving signals." And Elspeth's like, "I have a motive face. I have emotions on my face." And like, this guy is doing a horrible job of like defending the person. You're not like giving any like leeway for his family issues. To which then Chaz says, "Yeah, when my wife found out about the other family." Like, just like just like drops.
Chaz is such a low-key scumbag. It's
Yeah.
fun to see
So
like
bad.
to see more information just come out as he's like, yeah, I'm terrible. There are
Yeah.
Chaz does have like moments a couple times where he's like, okay, you at least know something about the law because like he knows what to object to when he's getting
Right.
like, nudged by ideas like, oh, because I mean he looks at Elsbeth, Elsbeth's like, he's like, oh yeah, past acts. You can't talk about past
Yeah.
acts. It's like it's so funny just to see him know something of his job, but then just don't even give a crap to really care enough to do his job in the right way.
Yeah, agreed. This is also when Milton reminds everyone that his ancestors did not come over on the Mayflower to see justice miscarried, to which Elsbeth properly replies, "Guess you've never seen the Crucible, because the Crucible is where I started to dislike the Puritans because I could blame them for everything." But anywho, the Crucible is a big part of my upbringing. Anywho, Milton is not risking this trial, but and asks Elsbeth, "Can you control yourself if we continue on?" And she says, "Of course I can. Can you?"
Ooh.
Ooh, ooh.
Oh, Elsbeth, fighting against the power here. I love that, and
Yeah.
I love like this is one of those interplay scenes. Just like, oh, you and Michael are having fun, aren't you, Carrie? As you're being able to be adversarial to one another.
But this gets, as she goes on and saying, like, again, you're not giving any leeway for Chaz. You stack the jury to help the prosecution. And his response is, "I can dismiss you, Elsbeth, and hold you in contempt, and then I'll call the DOJ because, like, like I have connections there, and let him know that, like, the consent decree lawyer is not on the up and up."
Yeah,
And this is a big threat to Elsbeth. So, and it
and
also
that's
tells us like how connected he is.
yeah, that's probably one of the only things that can really get him to get Ellsworth to back off as much as she has. Because like, oh, like you're threatening my life here in New York. Like, let me like, I guess I can calm down a little. But she does figure out her own way to get back into the trial, as we will see. But that was a very interesting threat he made because, as you said, like it shows just how connected he is. I did love like we didn't really talk about it, but when they're doing voir dire or whatever they're calling the jury
Yeah, yeah,
selection
yeah.
process.
Look at us learning stuff.
Yeah, I watched The Good Wife. Can you tell? But when he's like, "Oh, so Ellsworth, you are a consent decree lawyer," he's like, "What is that?" like
Yeah.
I love the show how it pokes fun at this like really just kind of contrived way to get Elsbeth into the police station, which we've talked about. He's like, and what does that mean? Like, yeah, exactly. What does that mean? We don't know
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. It basically is just a cop. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's basically
yeah.
what it means.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a little nod to us as the audience too of like, yeah, we don't even know either.
Yeah.
This little interaction in the judge's chambers happens in between Ms. Davenport's testimony. So when she's back on the stand, she does tell the jury that Delia used a baseball bat, which is not good for Delia. And she says out loud, "I'll kill you and I'll kill him too."
I'll kill
This
you and your little dog too.
I this has me sometimes in my family. Like sometimes we say this to each other, and now I have me thinking about like not in a real like it's like I'll kill you, like I'm gonna get you, or I'm gonna kill you, like it's like in a joking way, and so I feel like that's how I
I don't
took.
think Delia was joking. I don't. I think Delia was serious. I think this is not that she was actually going to kill them, but I don't think her threat was at the same level as your family's
Yeah,
threats.
probably
Like
not. Probably not.
I think Delia was like real deal upset and mad, and we know that Delia, while innocent of this crime, is not is
She has,
sometimes not in her
yeah,
right mind, as we find
yeah.
out a little bit later too. Like sometimes she goes a little overboard.
Well, and she has the boundaries issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Speaking of Delia, we get her on the stand. We learn about their little like rendezvous that got them to meet each other. She saw Andy in the elevator, thought he was cute, and like tried to offer cookies. This was during lockdown of COVID, so he was like, "No, I like social distancing. I'm not going to take your cookies." She's like, "That's cool. I'll just break into your house and give you your cookies."
Oh boy. So and this is interesting because up until this point, this is probably like a little over halfway through the episode. We still
Yeah.
don't really know what the deal was between
Yeah.
Andy and Delia. So this is really kind of the backstory here of like, which is kind of a weird and twisted backstory. She's like, yeah, I broke into his apartment, gave him some cookies. So for some reason, he decided that he needed to follow a restraining order. Just as I broke into your apartment and gave you and put in some random baked goods. How rude.
Random.
Yeah.
Random. Then, while this restraining order is still in place, they're in the laundry room. She's watching a baseball game, finds out that Andy also likes baseball. They hit it off and they just decide to make the laundry room their own with
Better
their
over the
thing.
dryer, apparently.
Yeah. And, Chaz is asking good questions here. He's like, why didn't Andy lift the restraining order if you two had this thing going on? And she's like, it was part of the fun. Like, we had all these different role plays. When it came down to it, Andy was a bit of a freak in the sheets. Like, this is what he like. I'm not kink shaming. Everyone has their own thing. This was Andy's thing. And then Chaz asks Delia, well, if you didn't do it, who did? And she says when he had a few drinks, he'd get dark and he would say after what he had seen, he would believe anything of the people who ran this country. And I was like, ooh,
oh, okay, all right,
okay.
This
what does he know? What did he know?
I mean, this paired with when he, in the beginning of the episode when he tells Milton like I didn't tell anyone, like I don't plan on telling anybody. So it's like, okay, so Andy definitely knows something about something or knew something about something.
Yeah, and I really hope we find out what that is. Like, don't drop this one, Elsbeth. Like, I really writers and Elsbeth.
We better find out what. I'm sure we better find out what this was. Yeah.
But then Chaz goes into a line of questioning about like, what game are you watching in the laundry room? And this is like, we find out later, a very solid line of questioning. But Judge Milton is like, no, like, we're not going to answer these questions. Like, what game were you watching? He's trying to tell like who was this game between, but because of the objections by the judge, he doesn't get anywhere, which gets Delia to say like, you're the worst lawyer. My brother sold his car to pay for his retainer. And then she says in front of everyone, I'm gonna kill him.
Oh, yikes.
So she's not helping her case. She's not. And I mean,
find a better threat, Delia. Find a better way to express your frustrations instead of threatening to kill people, because that's not a good look, especially when you're on trial for murder.
Yeah. So Elsbeth comes home, has dinner with Teddy. They've got some Chinese takeout. Elsbeth wants to get on the jury because she's like, this is just so weird. I have so many questions. And I'm so sorry, Teddy, that I missed your day. I wanted to see you fall in love with the city. And he's like, I will never love New York. And Elsbeth she breaks down. She's like, you didn't love New York. I wanted to see you like it because then maybe you'd visit me more. I did like the thing about, she's like, we could go to brunch in Broadway and walk the High Line. And Andy's like, the High Line is a very tall sidewalk. And she's like, yeah, but I can see inside of people's apartments. Love it. Relatable. Yeah. But we also learned that everyone back in Chicago still doesn't understand why Elsbeth left, including Teddy's father.
Yeah, this perked up my eyebrows. So I was like, I didn't know there was so much like question. I didn't know that Elsbeth left Chicago abruptly, apparently.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking, like, is there another mysterious reason why we don't know? Is this going to be another storyline that gets brought up at some point? Because it really was just like, it was like, oh, like, I didn't know that this was that serious, because he talks about like, yeah, everyone's wondering why you left. Even my dad's wondering why you left. I was like, oh, why did you leave, Elsbeth? Really got me questioning what's going on.
Yeah. I really hope we learn some more there, because it's definitely not the story we got in episode 1, where she's just like, I'm here as the the consent decree.
Yeah, person. we thought it was just like she had been tasked with coming there, and after the Wagner stuff was over, she's like, hey, I kind of like New York, I might as well stay. Not that she was running from something, this seemed to insinuate that she was kind of running from a problem or running from something. It doesn't have something to do with the other plot line that's left dangling here about the pop star or whatever. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. This is when we get the Teddy fact of the day. And Teddy's like, I would never like New York because the boy I'm seeing is moving to Brooklyn. It's like, no. And this is like classic Elsbeth. Boy, what's the size? What can I order?
Which really had me thinking, like, if the guy you like is moving there, wouldn't you want to move there? I'm confused.
I think it's because he has been tied to DC with this job that Wagner got him. So he can't leave. And so he's like mad or whatever. But it's like people go to New York from DC like all the time. It's not like going from like LA to New York. It's a bit closer. But Teddy is still here concerned about his mom. And she says, don't worry about me. There are things going on in my life, but the only thing I really need is to see you. And they just stop the conversation.
I'm like, okay, like, is she talking about this mysterious divorce case that we haven't heard much about? Like, is that what you mean, Elsbeth? I was like, okay, sure.
Maybe. I don't know. And you can see she's like really trying to not ask more questions, to which Teddy says, you're not trying to ask more questions about Roy. Second fact of the day. And what brought Roy to Brooklyn is that he got a job at a podcast company. Again, really leaning into the podcast here.
Yeah.
And Elsbeth's like, oh, podcasts. Who else do I know that had a podcast? Oh, yeah, the jury guy. Oh, let's look up this podcast. Like, this is the very convenient way into the end of the story for Elsbeth.
Yeah, this is the eureka moment of the episode where it's like, podcasting. Maybe I should look up this podcast guy. Maybe he is who I should be targeting to get myself onto this jury. It's like, oh, okay. And we don't really understand what she's doing until we get to the next scene.
Yes. But this is her way. She's like, I know I'm going to get on the jury. This is what's going to happen. So Elsbeth walks into deliberations and tells the Madam Foreperson, hey, are we allowed to like record the courtroom? Like what's going on the stand? I was like, no. Oh, so everyone comes in. The judge comes in. Who's recording? Lonnie. We learn his name. His name is Lonnie. Lonnie raises his hands and says, it was me. My pen has recorder in it. I was recording it for my podcast. And Elsbeth's like, oh no, does Lonnie need to be dismissed? To which again, Judge Crawford is like, no, not a big deal. Like after the deliberations, like he can talk to anybody about it. He could totally use this.
I wonder because, the judge has been like hesitant to get rid of Elsbeth because he doesn't have another alternate. But now I wonder if he's like, no, I cannot have Elsbeth on this jury because she obviously knows how to do stuff. And like, she is a problem for this. But then because at first she's like, no, it's fine. After the proceedings, you can talk about the case to whoever you want, whenever you want. So not a big deal, which it should be a big deal because you shouldn't be recording inside. And then for some reason, it's the title of the podcast that gets Lonnie dismissed.
Yes. What was the title?
What is that title, Marissa? You go ahead. You're our narrator. You go for it.
As cited from season 2, episode 7 of Elsbeth, written in the script, not said by me, Nut Job Sluts Who Kill was the name of the podcast.
That was apparently the straw that broke the camel's back, where it's just like, okay, fine. The title is terrible. We can go ahead and get him dismissed.
Yeah. And obviously showing bias, right? Like, because he's already thinking that Delia fits this particular population of women. So it's time for deliberations. And there are some times where I don't like the title of episodes, but this one, I enjoyed the nod to 12 Angry Men with one angry woman. And we also get like one angry woman and Delia like beating up a car. So it was good. It's time for deliberations. We get 11 guilties and 1 purple question mark. To which Elsbeth is prepared. Like the marketer lady's like, well, I know it was anonymous, but would our one holdout like to explain things? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. Here's my note cards where I have everything written down. Elsbeth goes into explaining that Delia and Andy must have been Red Sox fans because Delia's from Rhode Island. And I forget what the Andy connection was, but they both love the Red Sox.
Boston, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But the bat that was used to kill Andy was signed by Derek Beretta, and Derek Beretta's on the Yankees. So there's no way that Delia would have this bat.
I was like, okay, this is all very circumstantial evidence. Like, this is not true evidence. It's like, okay, but I guess in this instance, you don't need real evidence. All you need to do is to convince the jurors of your thoughts and hypotheses. Yeah, this is actual evidence being presented. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then she also says, like, hey, the threat to Andy's life was made 2 weeks before Andy was killed. If someone was going to kill him in a crime of passion, wouldn't it happen like immediately after the threat? Because that was when Delia was messing up the car. And when it comes to the eyewitnesses and ear witness of this is where the timing comes into play. The ear witness, the lady downstairs with the music, said it was happening around Final Jeopardy, which famously happens at 7:27 p.m. Eastern time. And so that was a time marker. And then George mentioned that he had seen someone on the fire escape when it was raining, so which that made Elsbeth look at the weather, to which she determined it was around 8:05 p.m. So her hypothesis here is that there were two people on the fire escape, and that's enough doubt to vote not guilty in this verdict. It's not their job to find out who killed him. It's just their job to look at this particular case.
Yeah, if I don't know, if I was on the jury, I'd be like, I don't know, it seems a little far-fetched to me. It's like the easiest solution is that Delia killed him, so I'm just gonna write guilty. But Elsbeth's like throwing out facts and all this stuff, all these numbers. Like I'm surprised she didn't come in there with like one of those projectors. Like, all right, here's slide one. Like,
I've created this PowerPoint. In this essay, I will prove that.
Thesis statements,
yeah. And she says to the jury, like, we can ask the questions that her lawyer didn't. Like, we don't have, like, we are an active part of the judicial process here. We don't just have to, like, and I think that's also, I mean, again, I'm obviously reading into this, but a little nod to, like, you don't have to just, like, accept everything that you hear on television, or, like, you can question things. Like, it's okay. And because Elsbeth is a questioner, like, this is the outcome of that situation. The verdict is read in court as not guilty, and there's a little moment between Elsbeth and Crawford.
Crawford's obviously not happy because he gets the the verdict. He reads it, and you can just see him on his face. He's like, "Oh crap! Like, this is not good." And yeah, he like shoot. Like, I love the looks he was shooting Elsbeth at different points of this case. Like, he's like, oh, "You are going to be a thorn in my side, aren't you?"
And he chats with Elsbeth after the case on the steps, and apparently has done some research and tells Elsbeth, like, this is not an unsavory, like, you helped unsavory people escape justice. And she's like, no. I do like the shout out to Illinois. Corrupt governors need lawyers. Yes, that's true. I mean, not that my current governor is corrupt, but we do have a history.
So she did help unsavory types. So yes, I mean, he's kind of calling her out about this. I mean, let's not forget, she was Peter Fork's lawyer for a time.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
for those that watch A Good Wife, know what we're talking about. But so he's kind of calling her out right here.
Yeah, and she's like, well, that was a different life. Now I'm here on holding justice to account, and no one is above the law, which again is like a thing that we hear in the news all the day, just because of who is going to be running our country, that no one is above the law. And so it's her job to keep the accountability there. And his response is like, well, what about Andy? What about the justice for him? And she's like, well, maybe the police will like continue looking into the case because of this verdict. And he says, perverted disco lovers deserve justice too. And this gets Elsbeth, it's like a little worm in her brain. She's just like, oh, this is new.
It's not a full light bulb, but it's a little spark. It's like disco, eh?
Yeah. And she says to him, you tried to railroad her, and what I can't figure out is why. And his response is, get home safe, Miss Tassioni. What a threat. What a threat. Right? Especially coming from Michael Emerson. I'm like, oh my gosh, something like
get
some
home
sort
safe,
of thing is happening.
Get home safe, Miss Tassioni. As he like skulks off, is like, oh, thank you for your service, by the way. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I do wonder if we're going to get to a point, because apparently Michael Emerson is going to be in this season for 5 total episodes, from what we've heard from press and interviews and all that. So this is not going to be like something that's going to be solved next episode. This is going to carry out through the season. I just wonder, there's going to be the end of this where Crawford is going to like try and kill Elsbeth. Like we haven't had that yet, where Elsbeth's life has been like in danger. So I do wonder if that's going to and that's part of what's going on here as she tries to pursue this thing against Crawford. If he's going to be like, all right, I'll just kill Elsbeth then.
Well, she's got a couple of threats coming her way because of the case that we never hear about.
Like, I mean, that's not really a death threat.
That's not, no, but I mean, like, it's like danger. Like, those are her like danger things that are coming her way. But yeah, I do think there will be. I mean, this is pretty threat-like. Like, get home safe, Miss Tassioni. Then she sees Delia on the stairs of the courthouse, and Elsbeth asks Delia, like, what was playing when you found Andy? And she said, Donna Summer. And this is when Elsbeth's like, that was never said at trial. So that gets her to know that in some way, like being at the murder scene, Judge Crawford is connected to this case in some way. This is the first Elsbeth where we don't know the motive behind other than he knew information. Like, all we did was see someone adjacent to the case get justice. We didn't see like what happened, the motive and all of that we usually see in Elsbeth. But back at the station, Wagner is done with the complaints. He's like, I'm done. I'm not going to take open-toed shoes. This is not a thing I'm going to waste my time with. To which Lieutenant Connor is like, hey, there were more formal complaints this week about breaking actual procedure, like people arresting the wrong person or interrogating the wrong person. And what Lieutenant Connor walks away from is like, this happened because Elsbeth wasn't in the office.
Oh, I was like,
Jason,
what?
What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Like, this is how we're resolving this subplot of, like, Connor was coming in here with the resolve to get Elsbeth out of the office because she's bad for this, blah, blah, blah. But he's like, you know what, Wagner? There was more that went wrong with Elsbeth out of the office than with her in the office. So she must be good for this precinct. I was like, that is such a nothing burger of a resolution.
Right?
It's just like,
he's like, you knew that. And Wagner's like, I guess I did.
Yeah. Like, what? But this is it. That's the resolution to this. It almost felt like they had this whole subplot planned out. And then they're like, hey guys, we can get Michael Emerson for a guest star role for an arc. They're like, oh, really? Like, all right, well, let's just like get rid of this Connor plot. This doesn't mean anything. We can have Michael Emerson for 5 episodes. We got a whole bunch to do with him. Let's just drop this Connor plot. Because it was so easily dropped. And second of all, like, it's not like we should have Elsbeth in the office because the rest of our police officers, they don't know what we're doing. They don't know what they're doing out there. They're terrible at their jobs. So we need Elsbeth here to make the corrections. I'm like, so why don't you just train your people better?
Yeah,
or
no, like
fire the people that aren't doing their job right. It's almost just like, it's a good thing Elsbeth is here because we would be so incompetent otherwise. Huh?
Well, and that's like, so the police need a police state to effectively police. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what that's about. But so no, I agree. I wonder, like, looking at when this episode is happening, this is episode 7. I wonder what the conversations were about the run of this season. I wonder if they were planning for another 8-episode season. I wonder if there was something, because it does seem very disjointed, and it does seem like this is something that might have been introduced earlier in the season if they knew from the start, this being Judge Crawford, if they knew that they were going to have, like, I think we've got over 20 episodes this season.
I think we're exactly at 20 this season.
Yeah. Okay. So like I wonder if this was like you were saying, like a cut, let's paste in this Michael Emerson thing. And I wonder if like the end of the season either had to be rewritten or is going to be on par with the first 6 episodes of the season. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. But I do wonder, just because how TV shows are canceled and renewed and all of that, like so super quickly and not with much reason, I wonder if that sort of impacted the show or the writer strike or something. Like I don't know, but really something's weird.
It really felt like an abrupt course change. We're just like, the whole Connor storyline we were going with, let's just forget about it. It's just, especially since Connor wasn't even in the past 2 episodes. So it's just like, we almost totally forgot about that. And now it just pops up and just like, oh, remember that? We're done with it. Forget it. So I just wonder, like, are we even going to see Connor anymore? Like, is he even going to be a thing? Because it just seemed like he popped in here to get rid of that storyline and be done with it.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that he would be the corrupt one, like that would be like the turnaround, but I don't know. There's still time. I guess he can be, but like you said, it does kind of feel like this is.
It'd be kind of weird after Noonan to have the very next person also be corrupt.
But that could be like the thing. Like he can't hold a lieutenant. Like every lieutenant is corrupt.
Just every lieutenant, like the rotating corrupt lieutenant. Like, all right,
Yeah.
what's this one going to do?
Yeah.
We know the Kings love their rotating cast members. That would be interesting. But yeah, it just really felt like an abrupt end to this storyline, which is kind of like a letdown. Like, oh, like
Yeah.
this is all you're going to do with that? That was weird. That was odd.
Yeah. That was weird. Also weird, Teddy's leaving. Like,
Yeah.
he just got here. He's leaving. Elsbeth is very preoccupied while he's like there with his luggage, all of this stuff. She's like printing out pictures of the judge, and Lieutenant Connor stops by, and she has strong words for this man.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I know you've been trying to get me out of here, but I have unfinished business in this town and I'm not going anywhere. To which he's just like, noted. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I guess that does end that up. And she takes a picture of Judge Crawford, puts it on her bulletin board, and both her and Teddy are like looking at it. And Teddy says, what's going on with that judge? Did something happen with that judge? And she says, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun. End of episode. It's like,
that's it.
Okay, like, so that was very interesting. The whole Connor thing just annoyed me to no end. So I was just like, what in the world? But I am excited that we're going to have this kind of overarching case that we're going to have to deal with. It's something that I really wanted out of the season, where we kind of break up the monotony of one and done episodes and we just have more of a through line throughout the season. So I'm really psyched for that. I'm really excited for it to see where they take this, because the one episode formula, it starts to feel a little stale. It starts to feel a little like, we know the motions, we know what's going to happen, we know this is going to end in an arrest, we know it's going to do this and that. But I'm excited to see where it comes from. I enjoyed the Judge Crawford character, and I really kind of hope they give Michael Emerson a little more to do as well, because listen, Michael Emerson can get real kooky and real interesting. So I'm excited to see if they go that route with him as well.
Well, as much as I expect him to be a thorn in Elsbeth's side, I expect her to be a thorn in his side. And I think that is going to be really interesting to see play out.
Yeah, it seems kind of like this little bit of like a war between them is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like anytime it was both of them on the screen, and then, or like Teddy talking about it, I'm like, Teddy, your parents are fighting. It's okay. Like, it's not like, I know that's not his dad in the show or whatever, but I just was like, this must be really hard for you.
You were really hoping that he was Teddy's dad going into this. Like, oh darn. But I'm glad he's here. I'm glad this is going to be a thing.
Yes, agreed. So yeah, that's episode 7 of season 2 of Elsbeth. I think, are they on holiday break next week? Oh no, December 19th. We're back.
We'll be back next week.
We'll be back next week with Toil and Trouble. Oh my gosh, are we going to see Macbeth or something? I don't know.
Are we going back to Halloween? What are we doing?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. They have side universes in Elsbeth too. Maybe Elsbeth is going to become the Lost of the King universe.
Oh my. Oh no. Yeah, so that's our episode for this week. Marissa, do you want to tell the good folks where they can find you on the interwebs and what you're up to?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky Ski at It's Me, Marissa G. I'm usually talking about something, usually something creative projects related. Yeah, so follow me there to see what I'm up to. Jason, what about you?
You can also find me on the Blue Ski at JR33D. I am still on Twitter. Don't use it that much. I'm at JAYR1085 if you want to head on over there as well. As far as podcasting goes, I am on the Robert Has a Podcast Network on the Love at First Sight feed, talking about the show Married at First Sight with Asia Welch, Survivor superstar, on the podcast, A Perfect Match. So we're talking about season 18 of Married at First Sight right now. It's really fun, really good time. Check us out on there. This week, you can also find me talking about the show 90 Day Fiance over on that same Rob Has a Podcast over there with the host of that show, Puya. I guess on that podcast as well. And look out for the Ultimatum coverage coming up.
I was going to ask
in a couple weeks, because we're going to be doing a whole season overview of the Ultimatum for this season. So be on the lookout for that as well, if that is your jam.
I was going to ask about that because I just finished all of the Ultimatum. So I was like, I hope Jason's talking about this. So thank you for telling us that you are. I know.
Yeah. So that's us for this week. And until next time, stay good.